I knew this wasn't going to be resolved in just one episode, and I also knew that Spinel and the admins were definitely going to show up. There was simply no way they wouldn't be here at their own headquarters, especially when they are keeping something as valuable as the heroes under lock and key. Of course they were going to be present to guard them and to attempt to get rid of Liko and friends again. What I didn't expect though was the way this situation would escalate. I never imagined it would come down to Liko and friends and Amethio being forced into individual battles against one hero each alongside a key member of the Explorers. So instead of one big chaotic clash like last time, they are split up and thrown into what are essentially 5 separate boss battles. Based on how the previous episode ended, we already know the matchups. Liko will be facing Kleavor, Amethio will take on Lapras, Roy will fight Moltres, Ult will be up against Gouging Fire, and Dot will face Arboliva. Battling such fearsome opponents alone is already intimidating enough, but the situation is even worse when you consider that everyone except Dot is not at full strength. Liko and Amethio had to give Armarouge and Cerulege a break after the double Salamence battle, while Roy and Ult had to deal with a wave of grunts that left Cap, Lucario, and Sableye out of commission. This means Liko will only have Meowscarada, Hatterene, and Pagogo at her disposal. Amethio will only be able to use Corviknight and Zygarde. Roy will be limited to Skeledirge and Kilowattrel, and Ult only has Dragonite. So everyone is at a disadvantage, especially Ult since he only has one Pokemon while everyone else has at least 2. Therefore, it's safe to say that they will have their work cut out for them. Thankfully, Liko and Amethio have a legendary Pokemon on their side, which should help a lot against opponents this overwhelming. But even then, these will still be extremely tough battles. And this is assuming the Explorers themselves don't actively join the fights with their own Pokemon. If they do, things could spiral out of control very quickly. On this note, I love that, as always, Liko, Roy, and Dot will face Sidian, Coral, and Chansey respectively. Classic. In some ways though, this setup might actually be easier than fighting all 5 heroes at once. At least they are not dealing with all of them rampaging together and overwhelming the group simultaneously. But in another much more important way, this is actually far more punishing. Everyone is completely on their own. There's no teamwork, no backup, no way to cover for someone else's mistakes. Each of them has to win, or at least survive, purely through their own skill and the strength of their own Pokemon. Last time, Ult was clearly the weakest link, and the others had to carry him. That's not an option here. This time, everyone is responsible for their own battle and their own outcome, making this the ultimate test for Liko and company that will show off the fruits of their training. This leads to the age-old question, who will win? Honestly, Liko and company kind of have to win, right? For the story to move forward, they need to rescue the heroes, so Pagogo can reach its full power and the Lakuium can be dealt with for good. Moreover, they can't just leave Lucius's precious Pokemon in the hands of the Explorers, especially when they are being used like weapons. If Liko and company fail here, what's the alternative? Another raid on another base? Or coming back here for a second time and a third attempt? It's possible, but it feels very unlikely, especially since the moment they entered this room, the doors closed behind them, making it pretty clear that winning is the only way they get out of here. They are obviously not going to be captured. They are obviously not going to be stuck here forever because that would just be the end of the story. So I'm confident that at least they are not going to outright lose. Whether they fully defeat their opponents or just manage to hold them off long enough to regroup is still unclear, but one way or another, they are definitely going to find a way through this. One thing that's still not entirely clear though is what the exact setup of this battlefield even is. At the end of the previous episode, we clearly saw Liko, Roy, and Dot standing right next to each other, and then suddenly Roy and Dot just disappear and Liko was left alone. Either they were teleported away or some kind of invisible walls appeared and separated them. So what exactly is going on here? Are they in separate rooms? Or are they still in the same space but cut off from each other by barriers they can't see or cross? What makes this even more confusing is that later, when we see Spinel observing everything, everyone appears to be side by side from his point of view. So is he watching 5 different rooms on separate monitors, or one single area divided by unseen partitions? This matters because depending on how this place works, the win condition might not actually be defeat your opponent. It might simply be survive long enough to break the separation and regroup. In fact, the preview shows everyone together again, standing side by side with their remaining Pokemon ready to fight. This is an interesting shot for several reasons. First, there's no sign of Hatterene, Quaxwell, Goldengo, or Corviknight. Assuming they will all battle, Hatterene will for sure. Their absence here strongly suggests all 4 of them will get taken out, leaving Dot with only Tinkaton, Liko with just Meowscarada and Pagogo, and Amethio with only Zygarde. Meanwhile, Roy will still have both Skeledirge and Kilowattrel, and Ult will still have Dragonite, who curiously is not Mega Evolved here, meaning Ult seemingly will somehow get through Gouging Fire without using Mega Evolution. You would think that in a battle like this, with only one Pokemon, he'd immediately go all out, but apparently he won't need to, which is surprising to say the least, as is the fact that nobody in this shot is terastallized either. This tells me something important, which is my second point. It seems things probably won't get dire enough to force Liko and company into burning all their trump cards just to get by. Meaning that this episode might not be the true final battle yet. We might still have one more episode featuring one last, no-holds-barred confrontation where everything gets used. It is, however, of course, possible that after the individual battles end, everyone will simply return to normal, meaning Terastal and the Mega Evolution could still be used. Finally, this shot shows Zygarde collecting a lot of cells, which can only really lead to one thing, right? It will finally return to its 50% form. This will change the balance of power dramatically since 50% Zygarde is stronger than any of the 5 heroes individually. So it alone will massively tilt the odds in favor of Liko and company. This raises a big question though. Where will all these cells come from? Did Amethio have them stored somewhere this whole time? Unlikely. If he had access to this many cells, why wouldn't he lead with Zygarde's 50% form from the start? And realistically, it's difficult to imagine him carrying around something that can contain this many cells. The only explanation that really makes sense is that this is the headquarters of the Explorers. Assuming it's been their headquarters for a long time, Gibeon, their former leader, would have been here at some point. And since Zygarde was his Pokemon, it's entirely possible that it left the cells here, or that they naturally gathered around it here. We know Zygarde cells can hide themselves and go unnoticed, so they definitely could have been here all along without Spinel and the others realizing it. The cells were lying dormant this entire time, waiting for Zygarde to return, which is almost poetic. Zygarde returns to a place tied to its past, a place that used to belong to its former partner, to reclaim its true power right when it's needed most. I do wonder, however, why the cells appear to be frozen. Is this maybe the handiwork of Lapras or Glalie or some device to prevent them from merging with Zygarde? Or is this self-inflicted? The cells were perhaps hibernating or something. I guess we will just have to wait and see. A lot of other questions remain as well. Do they actually need to defeat the heroes, or will Pagogo once again purify them? And if it does, how are they going to stop the Explorers from just reapplying the Laqueum like they did last time? Can Liko and the others protect the heroes from being corrupted again and again? If they can't, this will just turn into an endless battle of attrition. Could Liko, Roy, Dot, and Amethio use Terrasto to have their Pokemon lend Pagogo their power so that it can eliminate all Laqueum present here for good? Perhaps, but if they succeed, what happens next? Back in episode 89, during the fall of Laqua, the ancient Pokeballs broke open when Lucius disappeared, and the heroes became wild Pokemon. Therefore, Liko and company can't just recall them into their Pokeballs and walk away. So what do? Do they capture them? Not necessarily as permanent partners, but simply to keep them safe and make them easier to transport. Do the heroes go their separate ways again, promising to reunite later, or does something else entirely happen? Honestly, I wouldn't be against them temporarily capturing the heroes. Then there's the question of, will this episode be the climax where everything gets resolved, or will this just be part 2 ending on a cliffhanger after everyone regroups and the Zygarde reaches its 50% form? And we will, like I said earlier, get a third episode that features a final all-out battle with everyone battling together using everything they have. If this episode does wrap everything up, it probably means the 5 individual battles won't be very long or very detailed. They will be about survival and buying time instead of being actual full, in-depth boss battles. If there is a third episode though, then each of these matchups could get more room to breathe and feel more complete and more intense. I could see it going either way. But since the preview already shows everyone together and ready for a final confrontation, my guess is that things will conclude here, especially with 50% Zygarde on the field. Either way, this is shaping up to be a massive, high-stakes, intense, and thoroughly exciting episode that I genuinely cannot wait to watch when it airs on January 30. Once it does, I will of course review it eventually, so please stay tuned for that. Also, please do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you excited for this episode? Will Liko and company defeat the heroes? Will they rescue them? And will there be a part 3? If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, feel free to click the links on screen. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making content like this, you can find all the ways to do so in the description and in the pinned comment. Whether it's through a small donation or just watching and sharing, every bit of support means the world to me. Thank you so very much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.